So, quick little video about experimental variables. Just for those of you who feel like you need a little bit of reference or a little bit of practice. We will have a quiz on these things tomorrow, and you're always able to make up those quizzes, remember? So if you might be watching this a second or a third time in order to prepare for another quiz to make sure that you're not making the same mistakes again. So these are the vocabulary terms that I want you to know to start off this year. We'll start with these two. Qualitative and quantitative are opposites. That's probably the first thing you need to know about them. When we talk about things that are qualitative, these are things that are judged by their quality. So you can say, that ball is round, or that person is tall. Okay, now those are qualities. Quantitative, on the other hand, is something that is judged by its quantity. And so with a quantity, you're always going to have a number associated. Numbers might be that person is 5'6", or that person weighs 180 pounds. Okay, those are quantitative. When we are doing an experiment in a physics class in particular, we are especially concerned with quantitative values because physics is all about uncovering relationships in the natural world that can be expressed using numbers and mathematics. That's not to say that qualitative things are unimportant. They're just not the focus in physics. So when you're designing an experiment here and you're trying to come up with your variables, let's say you're talking about the spaghetti bridge experiment that we're doing. When you are doing this, you want to come up with quantitative variables instead of qualitative. You should be able to measure the things that you're looking at. Okay? So you wouldn't want to look at, for example, stiffness of the spaghetti unless you have a specific way to measure the stiffness of the spaghetti. You would ideally want to be able to measure thickness if you're going to look at thickness. Something like that. Next thing, we have this idea of experimental variables. And experimental variables break down into two different types. Okay? The experimental variable is something that is variable in the experiment, something that will be changing. And it might be something that the experimenter, the scientist, is directly changing, or it might be something that's changing as a response to what the experimenter does. But these are the things that will change. That's the opposite of, let's say, the constants, the things that will not be changing. Okay. Now, of those things that are changing, we break them into two different groups, independent and dependent. Independent variables are things that the experimenter will directly change and can directly control. Okay? That is sort of the cause of other changes in the experiment. The other changes, the things that change as a response to the independent variable, would be the dependent variable. Okay? So you change this, and this changes as a result. It might increase, it might decrease. Sometimes actually the dependent variable, we think it's going to change and it doesn't, but that's often a significant discovery as well. In your experiment, anything that is not an independent or a dependent variable, and you will have one of each in each experiment, no more. Anything else is going to be a constant, something that you want to keep the same every time. So let's say a very simple, like kind of classic science fair experiment. You've got some plants, and you want to know what effect does playing music for your plants have on their growth. Okay? And so you're going to do what? You are going to play music. And you need to come up with something qualitative about that music you want to test. For example, keep in mind, in physics, we would not want to test like classical versus rock versus country, because that is not a quantitative value. That would be a qualitative value. Instead, we might want to change different volumes. And so our independent variable would be the volume of the music. That's what we're changing. The dependent variable might be the height of the plant, how high it grows. We change this, and that changes in response. Anything else would be a constant, something that we do not want to change. So the type of plant, the distance between the speaker and the plant, the type of music, these would all have to